So the other day, I was coming home from a friend's house. I slept over there, and this friend lives about an hour and a half to 2 hours away from where I live. So, of course, I get in my car, get ready for my trip, put in my GPS coordinates, and then I notice that on my phone, I have 8% battery left. And I was like, okay, no problem. So I try to plug my phone in and not think about it. And then I noticed my phone started making this weird noise, and all of a sudden I read, "There's been moisture detected in the charging port. Please unplug your phone." I'm like, well, that's not good. Good thing this feature exists on my phone so that I don't burn it out. So I, try and clear out the charging port, blow into the charging port, try and, stick the little thingy for the SIM card in there and just clear everything out. Wait a couple of minutes, and then I try again to plug the phone in, and it still doesn't seem to work. And I'm like, well, this is a problem, because I was already on the highway when this had happened, and I'd already put in my navigation, fully expecting that this would have been resolved a few minutes later. But it wasn't resolved a few minutes later. And then I sat to myself and thought, this is a bit of a predicament. I'm going to get lost if I don't have this GPS on right now. So what I did what any normal person would do, and tried my best to memorize the route from my friend's house all the way to my house. And luckily, my friend actually lives next to where I went to school, like university. And I'd actually made that drive back and forth many times to the point where I had actually memorized it. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to use it just to get on the highway. And then as long as I'm on the highway, honestly, it's pretty simple from there. I just have to follow the road for quite a few miles. So I kept on driving. My phone was slowly running out of battery. I was just still going. And I was genuinely contemplating a lot of things in that moment, because I realized how dependent I was on my phone for things. And then I went even further and thought about the fact of, damn, look how dependent I really am on technology. Look how dependent the world is on technology. We use our phones to call people. We use our phones as GPSs. We use our phones to keep notes. We use our phones to scroll through social media. We use our phones for banking. We use our phones for literally everything right now. These tiny devices that live in our pockets that can shatter at any moment if they're dropped on the floor are where most of our important things happen. Okay, 20 to 30 years ago, this wasn't an issue. 20 to 30 years ago, you used maps if you wanted to navigate to places. 20 to 30 years ago, you wanted to listen to music, you used the Walkman, or you used a cassette player, or whatever the hell. 20 to 30 years ago, you called someone on a landline, or you called someone on a payphone. There were different items for different tasks. And while mobile phones, smartphones have made all of this convenient, I can't help but wonder, what happens if one day they all just stop working? And you might think this is a bit of an irrational thought, but it isn't really that irrational, because recently we also had the CrowdStrike issue, where every Windows computer that was in any corporate office anywhere in the world was giving out blue screens of death, meaning the computer would just not turn on, would crash, and people couldn't do their work. People couldn't do anything, because worldwide, this was a problem. It was a digital pandemic that happened instantly, just from one update that they made to this software that is used, I think, for protecting the computers, funny enough. So I'm thinking about all of this as I'm driving on my way home, and I wake up out of this little La La Land fantasy world of the world ending because our digital devices aren't working, and I try to plug my phone back in. And surely enough, it actually worked. I was able to plug my phone back in at about 2% battery power. But I decided to not use the navigation. I decided to not use my GPS, and I decided to just straight up drive and see. Can I get myself home without using my GPS? Especially since I have gone down this route multiple times. And I actually did. I was able to find all the exits, read the signs, follow signs for where I live. And honestly, it's not that difficult to figure out where you need to go. Especially when it comes to location. if you have a general idea in what direction you're going, like north, south, east, west, and you know generally what city or overall location you're looking for, the sun in the sky and the signs that you're reading will tell you where you need to go. Bonus points if you have some sort of a map, some sort of local map that shows you all the routes that go, all the interstates and whatnot. Especially if you're in the United States, things like this are a lot easier. Now, this isn't always valid in every place in every country. Some countries have barely any road signage. Some areas are just very, very desolate and remote. Most people from out of town don't actually know the streets and roads, so they use landmarks. That's what I used to have to do in my small town. I used to remember landmarks because there was no street signs. You just went to so-and-so's house that was next to the big rock on the corner. But that's where I think, once more, the GPS thing comes into play. There are places like that don't necessarily have the best GPS coordinates or locations or accurate data because they're kind of desolate and don't work too well. But I digress. I memorized the exits, used the signs to get back home, and just like that, I was able to drive without a GPS. After that experience, I think I'm going to try being more aware of how much I use technology and how much I depend on it. Because if I really think about it, my job right now being YouTube is on the internet, is on YouTube, dependent fully on the fact that I have to upload videos that require internet, that require devices that are digital. So that is already a lot of digital dependence, okay? So I want to try something new. I want to try using less of my technology. If I can do something that doesn't require my phone, I want to try and do it. If I can go somewhere without using a GPS, I want to try and do it. If I can avoid asking, Google, Siri, Alexa, any of those home assistants, I will try and do that. And I urge you to do the same thing. I urge you to sit down one day and actually sit and think, how much technology are you using and how much do you need to be using? How much is just a convenience and why? Think about it and see what you come up with. Because I think that all of us almost overuse technology. And I think most of us overuse it and overdo it, especially in the entertainment department. Matter of fact, you're watching a YouTube video right now. That is entertainment that is dependent on technology. 21st century technology, that is. So maybe instead of watching this video or instead of doom scrolling for the next 3 hours, you sit and read a book. Something that doesn't require you to be on a digital device that eats energy. And by the way, not saying that reading a book isn't, again, using technology. The book you're reading was obviously created by a printer, printing press, whatnot, technology that has existed for many, many years. But it's its own entity. If my internet goes down, I still have access to this book. Whereas if the internet goes down, no matter how many computers I look through, I don't have access to an online Kindle book. Maybe instead of playing, Counter-Strike or any other online game, you go out for a walk. You go out and play a sport. Because once again, without the internet, without a digital device, you once again can't play an online video game. I guess you could go to the single player route, but again, you still need a device for that. Maybe instead of listening to music on Spotify, you turn on the radio. Because Spotify needs internet, radio just needs sound waves and a analog device. I mean, most radios aren't necessarily analog anymore, but they can be, and they don't have to be connected to the internet. And another thing about this whole dependence on the digital stuff is how digital cars have become, how much like computers they've become. An example of this is I drive an old car. It's a very analog car. It's, over 10 years old. So most of the digital doohickeys that exist in new cars aren't in it right now. And I like it that way because the only digital thing on that car realistically is the clock. There's a digital clock on the speedometer. And there's certain aspects of the dashboard that have like digital stuff, but it's mostly analog. It's so analog that I had to get one of those little Bluetooth connector thingies so that I can, connect my phone. Now, would I have liked to my phone to be able to just connect via Bluetooth? Sure. But if my electronics in that car go down, like the stereo and all that, the car will still work. There's no major issue. But in cars that are newer, I find that The dashboard is in most cases just a tablet now. There's no buttons really. So if that thing stops working, if you break that screen, sometimes you can't control your heat, you can't control the radio, you can't control any of the above. If you go down the Tesla route, Teslas are the worst. Because if that screen fucks up, you got to take that thing straight to the dealership. Teslas are like notoriously bad when it comes to how electronic and dependent on the digital stuff they are. I think it's weird that cars need updates. You know what I mean? As much as I'm into tech, I'm very tech savvy. I like new and improved technology. I always kind of get a little like irked by how much we depend on it. And I'm sure that everyone before me has gotten irked on how much we depend on stuff. Like I'm sure 100, 200 years ago, people were, a little concerned about how dependent we were on steam engines. And then after that, how dependent we were on horses. And then after that, how dependent we became to cars. Anything that's new is always a bit scary. But I think we're in a weird position where the current new is so intertwined with everything else in our lives that there's no escaping it. I feel like eventually we're going to be screwed if some very crazy smart hacker figures out how to just disable the whole world because it's all so connected. Anyway, I don't really know where I'm going with this. I was just kind of really thinking about how technology is affecting us on the day-to-day basis, especially because of that little phone fiasco I had the other day. So, once again, be mindful about what you're using your technology for. Be mindful how much you're using it. And try your best to not fully depend on it, because sometimes the worst case scenario does happen. And when that happens, you don't want to be caught with your pants down. Thank you all so much for watching. And as always, good night and good luck, everybody.